Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, that post yesterday really had me spooked. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've been feeling watched lately, which is particularly odd due to the fact that I'm working alone in the basement with no windows. I usually just shrug it off like it was nothing, but that last post from myself, it had me startled. You see, I wasn't planning on writing anything for a while, but it seems that God or whatever got other plans for me. Now, who is that man that I was talking about? Why shouldn't I trust him? When will I meet this figure? These were just a few of the questions that I had after reading the last post. Loud knocks could be heard from the glass door behind me. "Hey Paul, get your ass out here. I need you to meet someone." I heard Miranda shout from outside the door. "Coming right away," I shouted back as I quickly closed the laptop. Now, I can't say that I didn't flinch when I heard the knocking from Miranda. I probably visibly jumped a little from my chair as the knocking was heard. I'm usually not the type to get easily spooked, but it was something unnerving about the warning that I just couldn't shake. I brushed off the light heart attack and I just endured and walked out of my lab. "Finally," Miranda said as she stood up to meet me. "Let me introduce you to my business partner, Jacob," she said with a half smile and that cheering tone she usually has. Now, Jacob wasn't that tall. He had dark hair with a few gray hairs sticking out, bright blue eyes, and he was wearing a long trench coat. Jacob could use one less sandwich, but he wasn't fat by any means. He was what people would describe as chubby. "Nice to meet you, sir," I said, and I gave the man a firm handshake. "Hey there, nice grip, kid," he said with a slight chuckle. "Thank you," I said, while giving Miranda a slightly awkward look before I took a few steps back from Jacob. "We should probably get going," Miranda said to Jacob. And before they left, Miranda turned around and gave me an understanding wink, like she had just saved me from an awkward position. I then mouthed a quiet, "Thank you," before I returned to the lab to continue my studies. Not long after this, I was interrupted with a knock on my door. I turned around to see Jacob standing outside the glass door, gesturing to me to unlock it. I walked over to the door and unlocked it, before returning back to soldering iron. "Nice place you got here. What are you working on?" Jacob said enthusiastically. "Nothing special," I said, not taking my eyes off the modem I was soldering. "What's this then?" Jacob asked curiously. I turned around to see what he was looking at, and it was then that I realized who the man I had warned myself for was, and I solidified on the spot. What? How? Why shouldn't I trust him? I thought to myself. My thoughts were going haywire at this point. Miranda trusts him, so why shouldn't I asked myself. It was Jacob. He snapped his fingers in front of my face. "Hey, you good there? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, looking at me with a strange look. Yeah, I mustered out. "I have to go," I said hastily as I got my bag with my laptop and I walked out of the lab. "Hey, what?" was all I could hear from Jacob before I had exited the room. I hastily walked through the long underground hallway that led to a massive dinner hall. I rounded the pillar at the back of the dining hall to Miranda's office. I opened her door without even knocking and closed it hastily. "We need to talk," I said with what I thought was a serious face. "You all right there, Paul?" Miranda asked, slightly concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, both a little worried and intrigued at the same time. "I've done it," I said. "What do you mean? Have you done it? It? Or what?" she said, surprised and excited. "Yes, I mean, no. Fuck. It's hard to explain," I said, waving my arms in the air like a madman. All right, calm down," Miranda said, gesturing me to sit down at the chair in front of her desk. "Tell me what's up," she said, leaning back into her chair. So I told her, and I told her everything. "Wow," she stuttered before scratching her head for a bit. I just sat in silence. There wasn't much that I could really say. This whole thing was just weird. There's not really a handbook that you can look at when it comes to time travel, so you got to be fairly cautious. "I get all that stuff," she said while not stopping to think. "It's just one thing that I don't really understand. Why shouldn't you trust Jacob?" she said afterwards. "Frankly, I don't know," I said. "But it's what it said," I followed up. Now, this might all sound a bit confusing, but trust me, you'll understand soon enough. You see, I recognized Jacob. I couldn't pinpoint why or where that I had seen him, but I was sure I had. He felt familiar, like I've always known him somehow, but I was sure that I didn't know who he was. "All right," Miranda said worryingly. "If all of this mumbo is real, we better be careful," she followed up. "For now, we should pretend like nothing is wrong," I told Miranda. She nodded slowly before gesturing me to leave the room, and I did as I was told and walked back to the lab. I didn't think about Jacob that much. I tried not to, quite frankly. And the hours went by without a word being spoken, until Jacob cleared his throat and asked, "So, how's the project going? How far have you come?" He said a little hesitantly. Yeah, it's going good. I'm just finishing up what I'd like to call a flux disk reader," I said with a smirk. But the face of Jacob dropped and we were interrupted by sirens shouting.
"Security breach! Intruder alert! Please make your way to the nearest security room."
And it repeats itself over and over as me and Jacob looked at each other before he said, "Well, that was unexpected," he said with a brief pause, and then we took off to the nearest security room. The security rooms were fairly large rooms made out of concrete, with spotlights in the ceiling, highlighting capsule or pod-like machines on the far wall of the room. In the middle of the room was a table with clothes that looked like something out of Fallout 4. "Hey, happily surprised to see you two here," I heard Miranda's voice behind us. She shut the door behind her, locking it with a control panel on the left side of the door. "That should do it," she said, brushing off dust from her hands. And before I could react, Jacob pushed me into one of the pods in the back of the room, and then closing it shut. "Hey, what the hell, man? Are you crazy?" I yelled out, banging on the pod glass window. "It had to be done, Big Red," he yelled back, dragging out a gun from his back, and he pointed the gun to Miranda, telling her to be calm. "You should have listened," Jacob said. The glass on the pod was starting to fog up, and I felt dizzy, but I couldn't stop watching as I punched the glass window. "Come on, fucking break already!" I yelled as the window started to crack. My head felt more and more heavy as I started to fade out. A gunshot was heard outside, followed by a heavy thud into the concrete floor. It was Jacob who had been shot. Miranda at her knees, looking at someone in another pod. What? How? It doesn't make any sense. She stumbled out before I heard a voice. "I'm sorry. I have to," it said. Miranda fell to the floor after being hit with some kind of stick-shaped thing, and I passed out and I woke up in the facility's nursery. The nurse's fingers snapped. "Well, welcome back, sleepyhead," one of the nurses said. I sat up in the bed rubbing my head. What happened?" I asked the nurse in pain. "What do you mean? We found you in those old security rooms, whatever you were doing there," the nurse said with a smile. I rubbed my face for a bit, realizing that it felt different. I looked around the room, realizing that it wasn't the facility nursery that I've seen before. It was something else. It was the same room, don't get me wrong. Even the picture on the wall with the Men in Black quote was still there.
1,500 years ago, humans knew that the Earth was the middle of the solar system. 500 years ago, humanity just knew that the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you just knew that we were alone in the universe. Now, imagine what we just know tomorrow.
I always found that quote quite inspiring, actually. "Hey there, hotshot," said a voice behind the nurse. "You all right there?" The man chuckled. I didn't recognize the man. He was dressed in a lab coat with pens and instruments in its pockets. He held a clipboard under his arm when he approached me. The man looked to be in his 30s, slightly older than me. He had shoulder-long dark hair, and he was quite muscular. "So, how'd it go? Was it a success?" the man asked while waving away the nurses. I looked at the man with a confused look before I asked, "I'm sorry, but who are you, and how did I end up here?" The man chuckled a little bit before continuing. "You told me this would happen. My name is Earl, and I took over after your disappearance 10 years ago. Your time travel project of sorts," he said with a grin. "Let me show you our progression," he said, ushering me along through the facility. The place I've come to know was the same at its core, but everything looked so surreal. It was modern, everything was white, and the lights hanging from the ceiling had a light blue glow coming out of them. I didn't really listen to Earl when we walked through the labs and testing halls. I was too occupied thinking about what Jacob had said before. "It had to be done by Big Red." Why would he say that? And how the fuck did he know about it? Also, why do I recognize him? I dove deep into my memories. I've never met this guy before. And that's when it hit me. I stopped dead in my tracks, saying out loud, "What the hell, man?" Earl stopped and watched me with a confused look. You good there, buddy?" he said with a half-concerned smile. I got something that I need to do, I said. Have you cracked time travel yet? I asked Girl. How did you know? He asked me confused. It's classified and no one knows it yet. It was right before I found you I managed it, he said, realizing what was happening. You're not from around here, right? He said with a smirk. I looked at him for a while before answering. No, I'm not, I said with a serious face. What are we waiting for then? He chuckled and then quickened his pace. We shortly reached one of the labs hidden down in the basement, where a strange machine stood hooked up with one of the old emergency capsules that I had been standing in before. Figures, I whispered under my breath. Step right in, he said, as he held his hand out, gesturing for me to step into the capsule. I did as I was told as usual, found that doing that is the easiest way to continue to be alive. Anyway, he started to hook up a few different cables onto me before handing me a loaded gun. Just in case, he said with a wink before he shut the door to the capsule. Red flashing lights could be seen inside the room, and a mechanical voice could be heard in the background.
Please stand back while the red light is flashing. Please proceed with the given instructions.
The mechanical voice repeated itself multiple times. The sound started to fade out with white noise, and I could see bright flashes of a color that I'm not able to describe with words, but the feeling I got was emptiness. I felt nothing. It wasn't a light. It was more of an absence of light. The color blind people see, I guess you can say. When suddenly, I could see again, and I could hear. Outside of the capsule, I could hear the faint noise of two people speaking. It was Jacob, and I could hear him repeating the words that I've just recently heard him say. You should have listened, I heard. I could hear myself pounding at the glass before the capsule opened, and I stepped out. I fired. Jacob's body dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes, with his gun falling to the ground with him. Miranda looked at me with a scared, confused look before she burst out. What? How? It doesn't make sense. I picked up a metal pipe that laid on the floor beside me. I'm sorry. I have to, I said. And with a sad face, I lifted the pipe and I hit Miranda in the head with the pipe. Only a few seconds later, security came rushing into the room. What happened here? One of the guards pointed a weapon at me. He tried to shoot her, so I killed him, I answered with shame. You see, I had never killed a man, and I wasn't planning on doing so either. But I guess that in this type of industry, it's something that you eventually will have to do, whether you want to or not. It does not matter. The guards lowered his weapon to my waist before nodding to the others to bring me out of there, and they took Miranda to the nursery where she woke up a few hours later. Oh, where am I? She said softly, still trying to grasp what had happened. What happened? She asked me, confused as to why she was in the nursery. I looked at her with a faint smile and said, Jacob turned on you. That piece of shit. She coughed out when she tried to sit up. I was supposed to have an interview today with a new guy for your lab, she said with a small smile. Could you take it from me? She said with a smile. Of course, I said, as I put a hand on her shoulder before leaving for the office. Hey there, is this the interview room? Said a voice behind me, and I smirked as I turned around to see Earl. I tapped my clipboard as I looked up at Earl. So, Earl, I faked a confused look. What's your credentials? I said, looking back at my workstation. I couldn't help but to smile a little. I knew so much more than he could ever imagine. He said with a slight stutter. I used to work with nuclear reactors, and I've had an internship for the past year at an atomic research facility, he continued. I smiled again and turned around. No, not professional credentials, I said, shaking my head. What do you do in your spare time? I asked with a smile again. Oh, what? Earl smiled and slightly chuckled. I'm not sure I follow, he said, looking at me with a slight smile. I smiled back and looked at him with a serious face before, and that face turned into a fake, hopeless smile. I have no choice. You've convinced me, I said, shaking my head and waving my hands in the sky. You're hired, I said, pointing a finger at him in a joking manner. All right. No actual questions? He said with a surprised look. What do you mean? I've learned everything I need to know already, I said with a serious face. I got everything set up in the lab for you, I told him, ushering him out of the office. We took a walk through the facility, and I showed him around all the rooms that he'll soon come to know. My thoughts drifted away as I started to ask myself what I'm doing. I started to doubt the career choice I'd made going here. I missed the simple life. I thought before I heard someone calling my name. Paul? Paul! I hear Miranda call. What's up? I gestured for Earl to stay. How's he looking? Miranda asked, glancing over to Earl. He's a good kid, I asked with a smile of remembrance. All right, she said. So, what do you think? Should we hire him? She asked. She looked like she didn't like him that much. I already did, I said, smiling back. He might save your life one day, I said with a smirk. I highly doubt it, but all right, she said with a chuckle before going back to the nursery. I walked back to Earl and continued with the tour. We talked about old television shows that we watched when we were young as we made our way through the long corridors. This place needs some white walls, he said, while looking around the rooms, and I laughed a little before I finally spoke. Yeah, sure, Earl. I trust your judgment, I said, looking down at the floor with that same thankful smile. You see, I haven't known Earl for very long, but I knew that I could trust him. I mean, he did save both mine and Miranda's life after all. So, that counts as something good in my books. A few hours went by and I got no work done. I just stared around the room, not thinking about anything besides the past days. Why do I do this again? I thought to myself as I scratched my head. Sure, it's cool and all, but I'm not up for this shit, I continued to myself. I stood up and I start walking back and forth in the room. I'm going to quit. I stopped as I thought it. I walked quickly over to the cupboard that I had in the corner of the lab, and I picked up a notepad and started writing. Hey, Earl. I can't do this anymore. I need to get away from this stuff, but trust me, you'll fit right in. And that's why I'm giving you full control of this project and everything that we have established so far. Everything you need to know is in the laptop, and if you have any problems with Miranda, tell her I told you it was fine, alright? Anyway, we'll meet one day, and I will tell you how everything went. But all you need to know is that I won't know you, I won't recognize you, and that's all you need to know. Godspeed, friend. I owe you my life. Your friend, Paul. That's what the note said. I ripped it off the notepad and I unlocked my laptop. I quickly wrote out a message and sent it to Miranda. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I'm putting Earl in control of this project, and you must trust me. If you do not let Earl work on this thing, I'll be dead and so will you. So listen to me carefully. He is the key to time travel. He's the one that will invent it. I know it. I can't tell you how I know. I don't have time. You just have to trust me. Good luck, old friend. I wish you the best. And I pressed send before leaving my laptop in the lab with a note attached to it folded in half. Right as I was about to walk out of the lab, I met Earl in the doorway. He had a look of confusion and concern as he looked at me and then at the laptop, then back at me again. You good there, boss? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Yeah, I'm alright. I'm just hungry. Are you hungry? I said with a strained voice. Come, let's get something to eat, I said, dragging him along towards the dining hall. Oh, shit, I almost forgot, I said to Earl. He turned around as we approached the dining hall. I need to do something, I said, turning around. Earl looked at me strangely, but he let me leave. I walked hastily towards the stairs that led to the exit, and when I reached the stairs, I walked up, trying to look as normal as I could. Good day, fellas, I said, bowing my head slightly to the guard standing at the exit. Good day, Paul, the right guard said with a slight nod. I opened the door to the exit and walked over to my car. I started it up and I drove off. I drove for I don't know how long before I came out to a small town gas station. I filled my tank up and I continued to drive off. I drove for hours upon hours before I finally arrived at my destination, my old warehouse. You see, I'm writing this from my old desk where I once conducted business, and I feel like I need to explain some realizations that I've come to know recently. First of all, let me clear up some things about Jacob. You know how in part 4 of this story, one of the hypotheses was that time travel, basically, only splits the timeline in 2 equally probable outcomes of an action. You see, I know why I recognize Jacob. Jacob isn't really Jacob. He's me, but older, and from one of the timelines where I hold a grudge against Miranda for dragging me into this mess. A grudge big enough for me to travel back in time to kill Miranda before we had the ability to invent time travel. I mean, it's my best guess, and I think I'm not far off, sadly. Another thing that I want to clear up is why I even write this. Well, I had to, and if I didn't, the future wouldn't turn out as it's supposed to. So now, you might understand why this all had happened, and I will give you the pleasure of knowing my real name. I mean, I don't exist anymore anyway. Miranda made sure of that. So let me tell you a dead man's tale. My name's Charlie North. I'm still a dark web courier, and these were my stories. Hello there, old friends. Some time since we last spoke, wasn't it? More exactly, 102 days and 23 hours, 58 minutes and 30 seconds. For those who don't know what this means, it means I've had some nights with no sleep, and equally many stories to tell you. I'm taking my time to write because, well, my time is running out in a few months and I'm dead. You see, this tragic story has to come to end sometime, right? But let's not focus on that. Let me tell you about the little incident that called the past 100 days. For the ease of it all, I'm going to put this into, let's call it chapters. Mr. Smith's. You see, in the last post I made, I wrote about a man who spoke to me about Miranda. Now, Miranda, that's a whole other chapter, an empire. But this man is what we call a smith. Now, a smith isn't something you want to mess with. The smiths are trained warriors who got recruited as children. These are children with extraordinary and very specific personal traits. I would say damn close to the line of being psychopaths. Low emotional ability and high intelligence. These children are separated from their parents and trained and drilled on everything from advanced firearm techniques and close combat. They are a walking, breathing tool of death. I've had some interactions with them before, but lately, they've been so far up my ass that they should have bought dinner first. They're a real struggle, to be quite honest. I've also had my fair amount of close calls with a playmaker. The playmaker is a leader of sorts. He controls groups of smiths. We got more of them, but the playmaker is the worst of them all. He's been on to me since that damn crash, but I've become smarter. Have I become smarter? You see, I don't like not having a plan, but from that day forward, I always had a plan until today. You see, I'm a dead man walking. My empire that I worked so hard to build this past 100 days. I've basically controlled most of the western part of the world. It's falling apart. But you know, I'm already getting ahead of myself. And now the playmaker, that's where we are. The playmaker is not someone you would think of when you think of a person trained since childhood to be an assassin. The playmaker is an old man, one of the first of the Smiths. He's probably in his late 50s or early 60s, but still pushes on like he was 20. The playmaker is tall with a pale, scarred-up face. He wears a black suit with a long coat and an old beat-up hat. I wish I could tell you more about this playmaker, but I'm afraid I don't know much more about him. He's like a ghost. He is a real son of a bitch. I have enough scars from this guy to make a war prisoner from a gulag look like a newborn child. You see, after that car crash, I stopped being an active part of the business and ran it from afar. I didn't want to take any chances. I expanded, and soon enough, I had a global network of couriers. I could smuggle whatever I wanted whenever I wanted to. I thought I was untouchable. I owned a freight company, which worked as both a snuggle route and a safe escape for myself, and I made sure to load containers containing a portable living space, so whenever I had to escape, I had my route. I had a tight grip of many people in high places that did my bidding for me. I had a mobile medical dispatch team with buildings all over every major city in the West. I had even started to make my way into the Russian market. Who do you think is supplying them in Ukraine? Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, You're helping a country to attack another innocent country? How could you? Well, they were the higher bidder. Also, I gather a lot of information about the whereabouts of Russian soldiers and equipment, and guess who's buying that? And now that we've gotten that part done, everything worked just fine until about a month ago, when one of my bodyguards told me to evacuate my safe house immediately. Now I did as I was told, and I was put into my own car. I thought it was my own car until my eyes met with a very familiar face. Miranda. A long time no see, Miranda said with a smirk as she took out a folder. I just looked at her for a while without saying anything. You've managed to make a pretty big name for yourself, haven't you, Charlie? Miranda continued. Or do you want to be called the ghoul? What do you prefer? Miranda asked with a little laugh. I looked at her for a few seconds before I replied. Well, do you know why they call me that? I asked, not leaving her eyes with my gaze. And before she could answer, I continued. It's because no one knows if I'm dead or alive. You see, Miranda, thanks to you, I don't exist. Hell, I should thank you. I laughed. And now you see, in around 30 seconds, I won't be here anymore, and you'll be dead. I said with a straight face again, relaxing back into the chair. And how do you think to do that? Miranda laughed, but before she could continue, the car stopped. Thank you for your question. Sadly, I don't have time to explain. It was nice knowing you, Miranda. I opened the door on my right as one of my bodyguards shot Miranda. Let me explain what actually happened here. Now, Miranda had her empire of her own. She was involved with some really big names, and my way to the top is a stairway of bodies. Miranda happened to be the first of them all. You see, it was an evacuation, but I knew it would happen because a source of mine had told me the day before. So you see, this wasn't a kidnapping or a business meeting. This was my first move to a hostile takeover. The bodies I buried around 3 months ago laid the foundation of what my empire was to become. The sheer amount of corpses laying in unmarked graves would make you want to never go out in the forest again. I know, I'm a monster, but here we are anyway. I've come to peace with it, but let me tell you this. With every person that died of my hands, a part of myself died with them. With the assassination of Miranda came, hell, you see, Miranda was one of the key people to an even greater association with the power to control the world from afar. I didn't know this until around a week after Miranda died. When I came to one of my safe houses, I had a visitor sitting on my couch. This was my first encounter with a smith. Dead on the inside, only operating on orders. If the orders were to kill me, then I would have been dead right there. But the only thing this man told me was, "We see you. We know what you've done." Now, I didn't really know how to respond to this, but the man walked off leaving his gun on the table before closing the door to the counter. You see, at this point I was scared, because if they knew about this safe house, how many of my others were compromised? And I started to panic. I didn't. No, I don't want to go back to the times I worked for Miranda. I don't want to go back to that damn lab again. You see, I've seen what they make there now. They've started to work in biology, and it's not pretty. The creatures they've created, they are not of this world. It's like all of those mythical creatures you hear in old stories and urban legends. And they're real. I've seen them. They haunt me in the dark, and I'm sure they're coming for me. It's just a matter of when. You see, we raided a lab of theirs, and I got stung by a syringe. And I haven't been feeling like myself since then. I found scratch marks on my door last night too. They've gotten to me. They just couldn't get through, but they're evolving. They're getting smarter. This morning, I saw that they managed to use the handle, but it was locked gladly, so I need to get out of here. I don't want to end up like the people on the tape I found. My warning to you is simple. Don't search for me. Don't look for the association. Don't get involved in this. They're dangerous, and they won't hesitate to come for you. As for me, I regret that I got involved with this, because I will undergo another night of no sleep. And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.